Nicole Neily is joining me today. She is the president and founder of Parents Defending Education. Nicole, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I just want to dive right in because this Massachusetts public school has come under fire for something that it's encouraging its students and parents to do. Allegedly, it's telling them to report incidents of bias and discrimination, and Parents Defending Education has not been happy with this decision. So I want to start there. What exactly is going on, and can you sort of give us a rundown of what this reporting looks like?
Sure. So, Wellesley, Massachusetts, Wellesley Public Schools is doing what we have seen a lot of universities around the country do, which is adopt something called a bias response team. Bias response teams it's a portal, it's a program run through the school that encourages students to rat on each other. Universities have portals on their school website. In this case, Wellesley, Massachusetts has a portal that you can click on through the university's website. It seems to take you to a Google Doc, but it encourages students and members of the community to file reports when they perceive incidents of bias. Unfortunately, bias is a very, very broad term, and it encourages people to report on anything. And reports can also be filed anonymously. So if you say something that maybe I don't like, I can say I perceived it as being biased. It's very much in the eye of the beholder. And then that report goes to a group of administrators. And the Wellesley Public School System, it's made up of, a handful of people with, intimidating sounding titles. And so students, when they're reported, they will, be called in for a meeting. Wellesley makes no bones about the fact that they refer the complaints out, as well as, they investigate and they will punish. And so what this does is it chills speech, because students and other members of the community, including teachers and other administrators, are put in a position where they can get in trouble for saying pretty much anything, anytime, anywhere. Because if somebody took it amiss, or frankly, even if somebody thinks that somebody might take it amiss in the future, they're encouraged to report on it. And if you're in that situation, it's punishment by process. You don't want to deal with the hassle of being called in to have to explain yourself before a start chamber. And so, really, out of an abundance of caution, we've seen this at the university level. When these programs exist, students just don't talk about things that might be controversial, that might get them in trouble. So there is a chilling effect that spreads across the campus. That's what Wellesley's trying to do, and that is absolutely antithetical to a proper education. People should be, students, everybody should be encouraged to think, speak, debate, persuade each other, maybe throw out something crazy and controversial in the pursuit of truth. And for Wellesley to try and shut that down because, they don't want people to be offended or hurt, it's impractical. And it also is, frankly, it's creepy. And I think it's also unconstitutional.
Now, you mentioned that this is happening at the university level, and I wanted to ask, how widespread or how common are these types of reporting practices? Is this going on in other sort of public schools, at the elementary level, maybe not at the university level yet, but have you been seeing this more widespread in sort of the, elementary or middle school, even high school level?
It is definitely starting to spread in our K-12 schools, which is of huge concern. It was actually just mentioned in a lawsuit that was filed in Loudoun County, Virginia. That school system had a program where they encouraged students to report on each other. On the West Coast, Acalanes Unified School District in California. It was a definite flashpoint in South Lake, Texas, where there was a school board election a few weeks ago, where that was made one of actually the issues in the campaign. And it was one of the factors that helped an anti-CRT school board come in, sweep the slate, because people were so mad about it. This has no place in American schools. This is something that is ripped out of the headlines of East Germany. This is what the Cultural Revolution had, where it encouraged students to tell on each other. This is very troubling. And the fact that this is starting to make its way from American college campuses to K-12 schools is something that should really terrify everybody, because what happens in these schools is not staying in these schools. New York City has a bias response program. Think about New York City. Have they solved all of their other, violence and other issues? Yet they've decided to tackle thought crimes. It's absolutely mind-boggling, and we have to stop it.
Are these reports, I'm curious if these reports, and I don't know if you know like the exact details, but if they're coming up, these reports of, bias or discrimination coming up in instances like in the classroom where there's discussions going on, or if they're maybe happening outside the classroom where it's sort of like a slur or an actual like instance where it actually is, discrimination, or it's something that should be taken seriously?
Yeah, in the university setting, it definitely encompasses everything. University of Michigan bias response team said it was anything that happened in the city of Ann Arbor. Other schools like University of Illinois have said their bias response team covers everything online. A bias response team official at University of Illinois said that it was even if you were on spring break and you broke a window, that would fall under their purview. And so I think it's certainly, if it hasn't happened yet, it's definitely going to be the case where these K to 12 districts are allowing themselves significant off-campus powers as well. This was something that came up recently in a case that is currently before the U.S. Supreme Court, BLV Mahanoy, which is a district in Pennsylvania, where the school district claimed jurisdiction over a Snapchat that a cheerleader sent on the weekend. That's, what does that have to do with campus? And so as we start to see these school districts claim greater and greater jurisdiction, where does the line end? I mean, if it doesn't, then that's also a really creepy thing, because if the school district can, claim that they have oversight over things that are happening when you're with your parents, when you're on summer break, those are unlimited police powers. That's something that families should be deeply, deeply worried about.
And is this something, I know at the top of the interview we talked about, how students and parents could essentially report other students or, staff members. Can the staff report students and parents? I mean, where does, like you said, where does that line sort of end with how far this could potentially go?
Yeah, we got access to some training documents that the Wellesley Public School has for their teachers and administrators. And you're right, there basically is no line because they encourage teachers to report on each other about microaggressions in the classroom. For things that students say. And so you think about it, it's basically a secret police network everywhere. And maybe you don't report somebody because you understood that was something, it was a joke between two students. It was made in the heat of the moment. If teachers and administrators can get in trouble for not reporting on things, I mean, we saw this in the Title IX setting where that's called a duty to report. It makes people, again, very gun shy about building relationships, because if they can get fired, if they can be put in a position where I didn't report it because I understood the extenuating circumstances, but the letter of the law is that I must report all these things. It really, that chills and that terrifies people as well. So we start to see, microaggressions, people going above and beyond. Well, maybe this doesn't necessarily fall, but I'd rather err on the side of caution. And so that's why we start to see this mission creep with all these programs as well.
From the school district, talks about how it's, quote, committed to providing equal educational opportunities and a safe learning environment for all students, faculty, and staff. I mean, obviously that's a good mission to have. It's an inclusive mission to have. So do you see any positives that could come out of, this sort of reporting system?
No, actually, I don't. I mean, I think a lot of these programs, a lot of these school districts have other reporting mechanisms in place where you can go and talk to a counselor, you can go talk to a nurse, you can go talk to, a trusted teacher. But why do we need to have a formally structured program that encourages students to snitch on each other? That to me is really, it kind of goes above and beyond. What worries me is what programs like these, when it encourages students, go and tell the grownups, go and tell on somebody, it actually disincentivizes students just to go and talk to somebody one-on-one. I mean, if I hear you say something unkind to another student, I think it's kind of incumbent on me as a person, as a friend, as a citizen, as a human, to walk up to you and, pull you aside and say, hey, that seemed like kind of unkind, maybe don't do that. But when students lose the ability, when they don't know how to, or they're they're told to not have those kinds of one-on-one interactions, then it kind of sets students up. It sort of teaches them, just go and tell the grownups, go and tell the government, go and tell the police. I mean, if I have a problem with my neighbor, for example, over he didn't mow his lawn, shouldn't I just go knock on his door instead of calling the cops or calling the city on him? I think it starts to really set people up for that expectation that big government will come in and take care of you. I think that's a very dangerous thing because, big government doesn't understand the nuances of interpersonal relationships. And so I think it's just bad across the board. And I think it's something that parents, if they find out that something's taking place in their school districts, they should put their foot down and say, not to me, not to my kid.
Nicole, I so appreciate you coming on to talk about such an important topic, especially now that it is more common, like you said, through the K through 12 schooling. I so appreciate you giving some insight into this and sort of breaking down what exactly is happening. I'd love to have you back on if there's any more developments. I so appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.